Hello, this is the Che Katara channel. I'm going to briefly go over the minimal and maximal goals of the fake Russia conspiracy. If you listen to this video, it is my belief that this is the most compelling, the most in-depth argument that has been made in the entire country. It is being made here by somebody who is completely unknown, by somebody that has no public credentials whatsoever. I am simply giving you my thoughts on what I believe to be the world in which we live and the conspiracy that we have experienced. I welcome criticism. I welcome people eviscerating the points that I make. You can email me. If I remember, I will give you the email at the end of this video, or I will post it in the comments section below the video if I do forget. Let me begin. The Russia conspiracy is undoubtedly fake. Trump is not a Russian puppet. Bernie Sanders, sadly, is terrorizing the public, the people, with his tales of a Russia conspiracy, totally fake. He must know it's fake, and if he doesn't, it would make him an unbelievably ignorant person. Zero evidence as he terrorizes us with this fake conspiracy and degrades the attitudes that Americans have towards Russians in general and the leadership that they have in that country, of which the American public has little to no knowledge of how that society operates, what that type of leadership faces, or the contingencies that they experience in everyday life at a public level and at an international level or state level. The Russian conspiracy, in plain terms, is domestic terrorism. So, it begs the question, if it is domestic terrorism, as it so clearly is, who is pushing the fake Russia conspiracy? Before I address these minimal and maximal goals, we must establish the who. Who is? Well, it's multiple institutions and individuals. The media is pushing the fake Russia conspiracy, as we all know. CNN and MSNBC in particular, with a mythical and prodigious amount of time and resources spent on propagandizing the public with lies, with propaganda, with pure agitprop, in the most cynical use of media, perhaps in the history of the country, though we must not dispel the consequences of past media lies, past media incompetence when it came to issues like weapons of mass destruction inside of Iraq, and so on and so on. Need we review the litany, the history of the Vietnam War, where the media was not nearly as contentious as the powers that be would have you believe, or even as it is taught in the classes at present? So, the media has most definitely been an institution involved. The intelligence agencies. And of course, we have former intelligence agents who have moved into the private sector who are also involved in this conspiracy. And they profit from this enormously with their television appearances and their book deals and so on and so on. The FBI and CIA has a particular participation in this Russian conspiracy, as we see with the special counsel of Robert Mueller, who comes from the FBI, where he had formally lied criminally about weapons of mass destruction, and to date has never faced his court date for sending this country to war in violation of international law and United States constitutional law. But many of us who have friends that died inside of Iraq, or a friend, which is common for too many Americans, or for those Iraqis that lost family members, that had their lives either disrupted or destroyed, or lost their neighborhood connectivity, or had to flee as refugees, or had to face torture, maiming, crippling disability, all and more of the types of terror that they faced on a fairly regular basis inside of Iraq. All of these consequences because of lies about weapons of mass destruction. You can listen to Robert Mueller lying in front of Congress about weapons of mass destruction. That is in the public record. He has to date faced no consequences, and he is lionized now by the Democratic Party, shockingly, not so shockingly, as a hero and a saint and someone of the most impeccable credentials, someone who has been canonized as such a compelling national figure. Is to have this reality, to have this presented to us as a people, is deeply insulting, cynical, and abusive to a heinous extent. The fact that they would expect us to accept such a vile slew of lies that they push upon us. So, the intelligence agencies are involved. John Brennan, who was the CIA director under Barack Obama, has a particular participation in this conspiracy as he stokes it with his frequent appearances within the media apparatus, as he knows how to use based on his professional expertise, his past professional participation. He knows how to use that apparatus to get his message out, and he knows how these institutions function and what he can get away with, so to speak. You also have, in addition to media participation, intelligence agencies participation, you have political operatives. If you want an example of what a political operative looks like, one that is particularly slimy and vile in terms of his opportunism, in terms of his total commitment to seeing the Democratic Party, the neoliberal Democratic Party, either stay in power when they have power, or gain power, or consolidate power. He is all about the Democratic Party. His name is one David Corn. If you want to read a piece of propaganda, a piece of filth that is portrayed as journalism, an insult to the intelligence of anybody that reads it, you can go to Mother Jones, October 31st, 2016. David Corn is so upset, he's so agitated that the fake Russia conspiracy did not get out prior to the 2016 presidential election. He wrote an entire article about it, lying continuously about the types of evidence that he had, just misleading people, using his public access, his access to platforms that he has given on MSNBC, that he has given in Mother Jones. And although I have not read The Nation in recent years, I remember seeing his name in The Nation. He has given a platform on numerous so-called progressive apparatuses, whether they be websites or magazines or the television media. With this extraordinary access, he decides to lie, to play games, to play on Team Democrat. But terrorizing the public, that means nothing to him. If we are subjected to now going on 3 years of terrorism as a result of this fake Russia conspiracy, it matters not to people like David Corn, who are just total opportunists in life. They care not for democracy. They care not for honest discourse. And at the end of the day, they add up the scores of their team. There's a Republican team and a Democrat team. What is the final score? Well, for David Corn, the score that matters the most what life is like, the well-being of the American public matters not. It is about his commitment to his ideology, to his team. So, if we consider the participants, the media, intelligence agencies, disgraceful people like David Corn, these political operatives, now we have a fourth component, the politicians. Politicians like Harry Reid in 2016, who tried to get the fake Russia conspiracy out prior to the 2016 election with no evidence whatsoever. He wanted to lie to the public to alter the presidential election, to eliminate any chance that the Trump insurgency could be elected. You also have people at present, where you had Harry Reid in 2016, at present, you have Nancy Pelosi, the entire Democratic Party establishment with Adam Schiff as its leader, lying continuously to Congress, knowingly lying, knowingly violating the law, knowingly violating the civil rights of people associated with the Trump campaign, engaging in these show trials, these show investigations, and even Ocasio-Cortez, that person that people believe is part of some form of resistance, continually with her silence helps this fake conspiracy along. She does not stand up with the courage that she should. She is an embarrassment to the feminist tradition, to the civil rights tradition, to the Black Power tradition, to all those beautiful traditions of dissent in this country, with her embarrassing, opportunistic behavior as she caters to a certain extent to the Democratic Party establishment. She also, to a certain extent, is on Team Democrat. A fifth component, the corporate power in this country and their clown lackeys. For example, let's qualify the clown lackey with some characters. Bill Maher, comedian, lying continuously about the Russia conspiracy, just propagates it on a regular basis. Colbert, the late night show hosts that you see on television. The hack, Alec Baldwin, who isn't performing comedy, but a cheap, infantile comedy fit for consumption-oriented citizens who at best could be seeking happy slaves, happy subjects, or if they are themselves a slave or a subject, would not mind being a citizen for once in their life with their own slaves and subjects. Those fake performances where they want harmony in this world as they turn it into their own personal, upper middle class to wealthy playground. It is a disgrace to the idea of a democracy, to the idea of a workers' republic, these things that have been cherished historically amongst the poor and the lower middle class in the United States, that they be trampled upon. These are the aspects of the real American dream. So, we have these players that I have just mentioned in this sad and cynical game, participating and signaling amongst each other. As if you read John Kenneth Galbraith's economic theory, which I have familiarized myself with from the 1970s, the 1980s, and I believe he sadly passed away some years ago, he gives a signaling theory where corporations participate in pricing and selling mechanisms based on their expectations of other corporations, of other competitors. We see this operating with the fake Russia conspiracy as they signal amongst each other. How far can they go? What information is acceptable? What are you willing to say publicly? How are you willing to formulate this lie? Whether it be conscious or subconscious, these this is the reality. The domestic terrorism that is the fake Russia conspiracy lives on, and they continue. So, along with collusion with the intelligence agencies, perfectly willing to stoke this lie and to aid all these different institutions and people in propagating it, we must consider, how does a fake conspiracy spread and have such constancy as it has had, and yet, in the face of proof of no evidence, they continually propagate this fake conspiracy to date? We are in the middle of April 2019, and still they will not give it up. They will not stop the lies. No amount of evidence will satisfy these people. They are completely committed to terrorizing the public for as long as they can. Thankfully, it does seem, according to the polling data that I have seen, it has worn thin, but we must consider it's been 2 years, going on 3 years now. We are in year 3. The damaging effects have already occurred. I'm going to go over it with the minimal and maximal goals. Now, the minimal goals are usually more short-term oriented, whereas maximal goals are generally realized later, but that is not always the case, as I will review. So, there is market signals, as I have mentioned, among people and institutions. Market signals being those reasonable expectations, those words or those aspects of what they call an investigation that they let out into the media, that information that they let out among institutions and people with similar goals who share an opportunistic ethic, opportunistically inclined. Market signals, much like John Kenneth Galbraith shared about institutions sending signals to adjust products and pricing, they send signals to adjust their Russia conspiracy stories. And, well, if you look at it as a price, how far do we go? What do we say? What's the topic of the day? We have even seen disproven elements of the Russia conspiracy recycled a year later or 2 years later. They bring it back. They rehash it because the truth does not matter. The news, the corporations, well, when you say news, they are corporations, but I'm talking about corporations in general, and also the news corporations. The intelligence agencies function accordingly on these free market assumptions. You must note my sarcasm because, as we all know, the many institutions in our society, not totally, but almost entirely, function within fascist tyrannies. These individuals are working within fascist tyrannies. If you think Trump is a fascist, well, look at the dominant institutions of your own society and their authoritarian internal mechanisms. You need look no further. So, as these institutions like MSNBC, CNN, former intelligence officials, people like Robert Mueller and his team, as they send these signals of expectations and what goes for propaganda for public consumption, for example, like the fake 12 Russian intelligence agents indictment, where Robert Mueller indicts 12 Russian agents. That is a fraudulent indictment. There need be no evidence. Those people will never be tried in a court of law. That is a propaganda operation being performed on the public, being performed on the public mind. And it's not even entirely to convince you, because certain people will be convinced by it, certain elements of the public. Other elements will doubt its veracity or why are they doing that, and others will reject it and many times not even on the best grounds, not even on rational grounds. They just accidentally happen to be right about it because of their identity. Their identity leads them to reject the fake conspiracy rather than a truly rational and objective analysis of what is going on. So, when they send that fake 12 Russian intelligence agents indictment out to the public, it is meant to be consumed. And if it plants one shred of a seed of doubt in your mind, well, there you have the vile effects and aspects of propaganda being pushed on the public. These have marked extremely sad times in terms of journalism, in terms of the truth, in terms of democratic discourse, in terms of civil relations amongst people, which, before the Russia conspiracy, to be fair, was already in a degraded state. Our social communication politically, within families, amongst friends. But the Russia conspiracy has served to further atomize relations, to further sever some relationships. And, you know, you don't need to sever all relationships in society to be effective. When you sever thousands by the day, you have your desired effects, the desired effects of the propaganda, the reasonable expectations that people possess participating in this conspiracy. So, these people participating in the Russia conspiracy, they share certain minimal and maximal goals. Minimal goals being what they hope to achieve, if nothing else. Maximal goals being their dreams, their ultimate drives. We must consider that certain people do not fit this paradigm as I present it. They do not fit these minimal and maximal goals completely. Take Bernie Sanders, for example. We must factor in his own personal opportunism, his own personal strategic calculations in participating in these lies, or we must consider that he just might be stupid. He might not have the intelligence to grasp this with a greater understanding or the will or desire to know. So, the minimal goals, if we consider the first one, is to stave off the instability and uncertainty of dissent in this country. As we saw, and it offers a paradox, with the 2016 election, Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump together presented challenges to the status quo in various ways. Not total challenges, but they had elements of challenges. The people that work in our corporations, the people that work in our intelligence agencies, the people that work within the political establishment, the political operative type people, the former people that used to work in the federal bureaucracy and now participate in the private sector. These people all have a certain view of society and what they see as a rational kind of more centrist. In their minds, I'm not saying they're centrist, but in their minds, a centrist Republican and Democratic discourse. Or something relatively close to those bounds. When they see the instability, the challenge coming from elements of the margins, they find this totally disconcerting, concerning, that they have to do something about it, whether this be at a conscious level or a subconscious level. I believe it's very conscious for many of these people. The fake Russia conspiracy has caused, in this sense, where they have a minimal goal of staving off this instability and uncertainty of dissent, the fake Russia conspiracy has caused enormous amounts of social disruption for going on 3 years, where we see energies diverted into arguing over a fake conspiracy or just being distracted in general, or the fact that they take a lot of other stories off the table, or that they have sabotage the momentum of the consciousness raising that occurred during the 2016 election, which we all know occurred, where we see more and more people feeling quote-unquote woke. We saw a not insignificant fraction of blocking and a kind of balkanization of groups online due to this fake Russia conspiracy. Another expectation that must delight the people working within our intelligence agencies, especially at the executive level, where they see these results in society and can only think the status quo can hold. Now, where people are far less connected on social media, and to be fair, not just because of the Russia conspiracy, but the Russia conspiracy stokes it. So they're far less connected now than in 2016, at least among the present generation of adults. A second minimal goal that these people and institutions consider: Trump's economic and neoliberal protectionism is not accepted economic dogma amongst the neoliberal establishment. He violates several tenets of neoliberal dogma. 1. Economic governance divorced from any kind of popular will has been the goals of the people that run this society for many generations. They want to keep it that way. Even though Trump has kept it that way, he has injected elements of populism, or ideas, in a sense, of populism, that you can elect a president to kind of alter the economy in a substantial way, to empower people that are among the poor or elements of the poor and lower middle class. For right now, I will leave those extremely important issues of racism aside. There's a second aspect where Trump violates several tenets of the neoliberal dogma. It's not just about economic governance. Policy should not emanate from a White House power broker, as I have already mentioned, but from the major corporate, financier, and banking powers globally. Trump has violated trends dating back to at least the early 1970s. I will put aside the early 1970s and why I use that as a breaking point. We had what was called a Bretton Woods type of macroeconomic situation, meaning a global economic situation that was governed by the Bretton Woods Agreement that goes back to the mid-1940s. In 1971, that establishment faltered as Germany, Switzerland, France, and other countries decided to trade in their dollars for gold, and Richard Nixon decided to extricate America from the Bretton Woods era. Now, I cannot go into Bretton Woods. I think it is extremely important. I believe educators in this country should teach about that era. You can, to a certain extent, familiarize yourself with what Bretton Woods was by looking it up on Wikipedia. I went through the entry. It's not perfect, but it's a starting point, and it's not a bad starting point. It's a decent entry. So, what would my evidence be for making the claim that Trump's neoliberal protectionism is not accepted economic dogma? Well, I submit to you evidence of this. I believe we have primary source data. Bob Woodward's book, Fear, on Donald Trump. If you can put aside Bob Woodward's lack of objectivity, Bob Woodward's, I don't know how to qualify his disgraceful bias and his lack of commitment to journalism in general, but he accidentally stumbled upon, I believe, he doesn't even realize it because he's so ideologically steeped in his own thoughts. He doesn't seem like somebody that gives a lot of thought to the population or differences in understanding and so on and so forth. He's very much part of the Washington establishment. Anyways, his book shows how the economic establishment, if you read certain tales within the book's largely a waste, but this part of the book is very valuable. The economic establishment is trying to manipulate and undermine Trump's intentions. Trump's intentions being to deliver a protectionist economy to improve certain kinds of jobs that are available and to provide more job options for the lower middle class and the poor. Bob Woodward's book exposes in ways how this establishment works and what their attitudes are towards Trump, and how we could imagine their attitudes maybe even being towards a Bernie Sanders presidency, or any presidency that defies to any extent the status quo in terms of economics. A third minimal goal: Trump's broad agenda must be severely damaged. So we're even going beyond the economic agenda. It's Trump's brand in general. Trump's broad agenda must be damaged and compromised because his alternative vision damages consensus in this society. It damages social cohesion and further polarizes political discourse, both at the elite policy-making level and among the people. The elite decision makers are not opposed to contention at the margins. They like contention at the margins because a minimal goal is to achieve that, is to stoke it, to atomize dissent further, to inject a kind of hopelessness and defeatism among people that do not accept the dominant order as it is. They do not want the divisions among the general public. However, we must consider that they do want a consensus. They want a social lubricant. They want a unity, to have enough people that buy into a harmonious neoliberalism, a playground for the upper middle class to the wealthy people, where they're not so disrupted, where they don't have to worry about substantial change, where their stock profile can be well protected. Well, the Russia conspiracy acts as such a social lubricant. A fourth minimal goal that these cynical people participate in, believe in, desire: access to dominant institutions by executive level employees, particularly at the CIA, NSA, FBI. If you want evidence of this fourth goal, which is very particular to a certain group of people, I'm targeting this towards the intelligence agencies, their type of access. One need, in terms of primary source evidence, I refer you to Seymour Hersh's Seth Rich audio tape on YouTube. There's a ton of different videos on it. I believe it spans several minutes. Not longer than 10 minutes, I would imagine. I don't remember because I listened to it when it came out a while ago. I don't even remember particularly. It might be a couple of years now. I'm not sure. But it came out some time ago, where Seymour Hersh goes over what kind of evidence he has for the Seth Rich murder and what he thinks about it. Now, I'm not going to comment on Seth Rich. I could see all kinds of different aspects, but people that ask questions about it, that's okay. You know, I think you can ask questions and still respect the family. If you have questions, keep asking them. Keep asking for evidence. You know, but I'm not going to go down that road. But in the tape, if we put aside his information that he felt like he had on Seth Rich, where Seymour Hersh believes he was not murdered in any kind of conspiracy, Seth Rich has disavowed this tape. But we must remember, well, let me review quickly what was in the tape. In the tape, he talks about what I talk about, the access to dominant institutions and also the private sector where employees, former employees of the CIA, FBI, NSA are able to take their expertise and their security clearances into the private sector for their own personal profit. Or they want to maintain access within the institutions that they either currently worked or they formerly worked, but they want to go back and work for those institutions. So he kind of gives us what the attitudes are like at the executive level of these intelligence agencies. So he has that in the tape, a tape he disavows. But we must consider in his disavowal, is he really being truthful? We are talking about the man that buried the story where Richard Nixon beat up his wife, not just one time, on multiple occasions. Seymour Hersh was there in the emergency room. She was beat up so badly, she had to be taken to the emergency room. And this incident where he was called by an emergency room doctor happened shortly after Richard Nixon's resignation from the presidency of the United States, and in an era where women faced battering on a scale that would disgust anyone to even think about. Such a critical issue in those days, still critical today, to think that somebody would suppress such a story because of their own personal calculations is a disgrace in the annals of journalism. Hersh suppressed both the story and photographic evidence, and I would ask Seymour Hersh to revisit that again, to think about this again. A fifth minimal goal: cultivation of attitudes, perspectives, hospitable to dominant institutions. The people in our institutions saw disruption in 2016. You see the media and intelligence agencies and even corporate America constantly letting us know how much they love us, how much value they offer us. Institutions that are legitimate, institutions that are confident in their societal standing, institutions that derive a love and legitimacy from the public, do not propagandize you into believing things are true. They do not tell you what to think. They do not tell you, well, you don't appreciate us for this or that. Let us tell you what we do. They are manipulating you. They are participating in this domestic terrorism for their own institutional goals and for the individual opportunistic goals within those institutions. Gives them the people willing to do the work. A sixth minimal goal: rattling Trump campaign associates and to violate their civil rights, the violation of their constitutional rights, to generalize fear amongst the public with a show trial, a show investigation, and to fish for information or possible informants to take Trump out in a maximal sense, with the minimal sense being terrorizing the people for years so as to slow down socioeconomic change. You can see any numbers of examples of this. For example, Tucker Carlson had a federal lawyer on recently. I am not advocating Tucker Carlson's show. I often listen to people I disagree with in total. He would be an example of somebody I disagree with in total. But in my life, I don't really listen to people that I agree with. I listen to people I disagree with because I want to know what they're thinking about, what arguments they make. So let me go back to what Tucker Carlson had on his show. He had a federal lawyer talking about social change, and I believe this federal lawyer's views on social change are the views within our established institutions that are participating in this Russia conspiracy, and also people that participate within the Republican Party. So this just isn't about the Russia conspiracy. But anyways, their views on social change are that it can't happen too fast. So they have this notion of social change creeping at this extremely slow pace, so their stock portfolios are protected, so they can go manicure their lawn, so they can live in their little neat upper middle class to wealthy habitats, to not have it disrupted, so they don't have to feel the pain of the poor and the lower middle class. It is a total disgrace. But yet, they participate, terrorizing the people for years so as to slow down socioeconomic change. But even if the maximal goal of a coup d'etat of the President of the United States cannot be achieved, if they cannot achieve their maximal goal of a coup, Trump's goals, Trump's projects, Trump's legacy can be limited, can be compromised, can be damaged, along with the decimation and marginalization of dissent, whether that be on the left or the right. So, I have reviewed for you several minimal goals, 6 to be exact. I will now review the maximal goals that at times can be tied to the length of the conspiracy. So, one maximal goal is the marginalization and perpetuity of third parties or alternative voices, or people that represent dissent in the United States. Neoliberalism effectively extended into the future, where we can look forward to an attempt to co-opt the millennial generation, which is currently going on, as elements experience early advancements professionally while other Americans face intense age discrimination. A native comprador class of a sorts is being cultivated, which is not only being cultivated here amongst the millennials and the generations that will follow them, but abroad with a new class of educated foreigners in overseas corporations. And we must say that the foreigners that live in countries like China, the Philippines, and of course I think about the Philippines in this regard because they do have American corporations over there, that they are our friends, that they are human beings, that they should have the same opportunity that we have. But generally speaking, they do not. So this is not meant as a criticism of them, but to talk about how these corporations are behaving and what their intentions and plans are. So, the alluring nature of American consumption, those material objects that American economic so-called prosperity technology gives people, can be tantalizing for people that have so little that they could fall into the same traps that prior generations in our country fell into, as the corporation was the fascist father figure, the fascist parental figure. And many people that have lived through these, these sorts of tendencies amongst the corporations over time are well aware of those parental features, where you can be given the gifts from the corporation in one day and have those gifts taken away in another day. And if that would be the case, you were never free in the first place within the corporation because you didn't have a say about it. So this native comprador class is created. Now, there are elements of it that is just willfully created. These people want to be in the comprador class. They want to have their privilege, and they would really like it if their habitats were clean of any kind of dissent. And even some of them are dissenters, but they're really not willing to do the hard work or make the sacrifices that would affect their pocketbook or their potential earnings in the future. The fake Russia conspiracy, in my view, has not guaranteed this project, but has helped it along. These corporations aim to have their power in perpetuity. They do not imagine an alternative world. They do not see the world as, well, maybe the people will decide differently and maybe we'll have to organize this business on a worker control basis. They don't think like that. They think about keeping their power. They think about moving their power forward. And if possible, they mean to expand their market share and power. Those are the calculations of the authoritarian corporation. There isn't a democratic mechanism. A second maximal goal, the impeachment of Donald Trump and/or devastation of his initiatives, along with altering of elections on a massive scale as a brake on social change. And this varies, the mechanisms of this vary according to perspectives. Sanders also participates in this as it is favorable to his brand, sadly. A third maximal goal, lowering of consumption-oriented expectations and aspirations amongst the general public. Trump violates this to a certain extent. Or the ability, so lowering of those consumption-oriented expectations and aspirations, or ability to gain worker control in the workplace, which certainly Donald Trump is not for anything like that. But when you start asking questions, when you start challenging at the margins, when legitimacy of the powers that be, or even it would just require elements of the powers that be. So if, say, the Democratic Party or Republican Party as institutions came into question, other institutions in the society, like corporations, like intelligence agencies, would fear that if they have questions here, they may move to questions there when they take care of the here. So if they take care of the here, which is the party system, they may move to the intelligence agencies. Now we have a situation where people not only mistrust the political institutions, but they mistrust the intelligence-laden institutions. It is not a far stretch, although at present the corporate powers appear safe from the public purview, that maybe, just maybe someday, or it may not even be in the not too distant future, or it could be the distant future, humans are hard to predict, that the corporations feel like they may start to be called or come under increasing attention from the public, increasing questioning about what's going on. And if people ask too many questions, what path will they go down? What types of politicians will become acceptable? I think, in part, this explains the participation of that person that's associated with Starbucks, I don't know who he is, in his attempts to run for president and the humorous attempts to crush him by the Democrat establishment that is within the media. So you even see that even people that share minimal and maximal goals, they sometimes come into conflict. That would be an example. He's more of somebody that has a personal agenda and so much personal power that he's violating some of the institutional norms of the country. But he's been trying nonetheless. It'll be something to see. I don't know if he'll make it into the actual presidential election. I mean, I doubt it, but who knows? You don't know. You don't know. So, the lowering of consumption-oriented, the third point, I'll repeat it, lowering of consumption-oriented expectations, aspirations, or ability to gain worker control in the workplace based on a kind of aspirational politics that the Democratic Party is pushing, an identity politics that the Democratic Party is pushing, politics of righteousness, keeps the public from intervening in the policy. So you can put something like reparations out there. You can cheapen the entire conception. You can play on the racial divisions that exist attitudinally in the country. You can play on that. You can turn the voters into props. And that's precisely what the Democratic Party has done, and the Republican Party is no better. This aspirational politics, the identity politics, the politics of righteousness, divides and conquers. The fake Russia conspiracy has acted as a cohesive lubricant of unity in a subconscious sense. And this cannot be lost on the people participating in this cynical and vile conspiracy, these lies. And as a distraction in a conscious sense for going on 3 years to stifle radical shifts in some attitudes in recent years. These attitudes have been shaken to some extent by 9/11, the financial meltdown from a decade prior, illegitimate wars, violence, and the neoliberal abuse that is daily of the poor and lower middle class. And we need not leave out the middle class, who also suffers from these daily relations. And one wonders, how much do the wealthier elements suffer? Although it must be said, their pocketbooks certainly do not suffer. A fourth maximal goal of the people participating in this vile conspiracy, these lies that they push amongst the American public, the neoliberal economics that dominate our economic situation. If you want to know what neoliberalism is, it is accepted by both the Democratic and the Republican Party. It is an economics divorced from democratic inputs, divorced from democratic change, divorced from democratic discourse, divorced from any kind of democratic say, as the dominant corporations, the dominant international banking institutions, the dominant interests that make up the wealthier elements of this society, a fraction of 1%, effectively make the policy. And if you look at the mainstream productions of, we have mainstream institutions at like Harvard University and other universities that are considered powerful in terms of their social capital in this country, that have produced publications where they analyze how much American policy matches the aspirations of people in certain classes. And it is without doubt, and this is even shown in mainstream publications, as you move up the income ladder, policy starts reflecting your interests more. So you have an upper middle class that isn't without, like, they aren't without dissent in their own respect, but society is largely okay with them in terms of how they live their lives and things like that. But as you go up the income scale and you get to a fraction of 1%, it's off the charts. These people are largely making policy, and they certainly don't mind making the policy. So the fake conspiracy has solved this issue as it further atomizes people, and they can extend the neoliberal economic program as an end of history program. And this is not unique in history, because neoliberalism is neither new or necessarily liberal, but it is an organizing concept. It's how we describe the dominant economy that dominates the world, is the economy of the United States, and what we project on other countries, what Europe has, what Europe projects on other countries, and so on and so forth. It is hard for people globally to avoid the neoliberal tentacles. So we see that in the sense of the neoliberal economic project, the minimal goals have been achieved, because it appears that the massive amounts of dissent and wokeness that came out of the 2016 Bernie Sanders and Trump challenge have been, to a certain extent, not completely. They've been hacked away at. There has been a further atomization of people on social media. So we see, in a minimal sense, it's kind of been staved off. There's been limits to the level of consciousness raising. So people had their consciousness raised at a kind of superficial level by Bernie Sanders. It isn't what I would call a deep consciousness raising, though some people have moved on in a deep sense, because the human mind works in a funny sense. Even superficial consciousness raising, like Bernie gets up and he says, the big banks, billionaires and millionaires. Well, he's a millionaire now, so now I have to say billionaire. But like, so he talked about billionaires and millionaires and who's controlling the policy, and you don't have universal health care, which I support universal health care. That's a good aspiration and a real policy goal. So he says these things in a sort of superficial sense. It's not particularly deep. In fact, I've talked to numerous people. You know, you see them in the coffee shop or something, and they tell you about what they think about Bernie, and then they like repeat things that Bernie says. But then if you ask them deeper questions, they can't really go deep below the surface because it's been a superficial conscious raising. But what I have seen amongst some of those people is as they ask more questions, they're seeking more information, they develop a deeper consciousness, and that is the danger for the powers that be. So they have to limit even the superficial consciousness raising, where Bernie's kind of limited himself. He really could have done a lot more, but he decided not to because he's been in the political establishment for a long time. He has a lot of friends within the Democratic Party. So there's been a lot of dishonesty that has been injected into his type of politics. So I will leave it at that. If you made it through almost an hour, wow. So I definitely could stand to hear some criticism about the points that I've made, or maybe inputs that you have, or even things that maybe I forgot. You know, maybe there's an important minimal goal or a maximal goal that you consider, or maybe you think the whole thing is just kind of stupid. Like, what are you doing on this Che Katara channel, wasting my time with this? You know, feel free to let me know what you think. If you have anything to add, maybe something to challenge. Well, I don't necessarily see this that way, you know, have an argument. I love to read people's different views. I know that this would be disconcerting for a lot of people, the things that I mentioned. Like, oh, you know. And oftentimes when you make generalizations, like a lot of what I say are generalizations, you always have exceptions to the rule. And reality is never so completely blunt, but we generalize and organize our reality so as to better understand it. So it doesn't have to be 100% true to be an excellent point. What we see in our discourse nationally with the kind of self-righteousness that people particularly experience as so-called independence, although their independence I leave in question because they often vote Democrat or Republican, or the Democrat or the more explicit Democrats and Republicans. There's a politics of self-righteousness that is rather robust. So these points that I make challenge a lot of the views that people hold within those institutions and in much of our society. So, you know, just wanted to make that point, and I appreciate if you watched this, and I hope it was beneficial to you. I spent a little bit of time on it, not much. I have a lot of work to do, so I got to go back to work. I just want to say that this is made with the love of the American public. It is a deep love. I love people. I love enthusiasm. I love people being themselves. It must be seen in that sense. There isn't another sense to see it. My contempt, my hostility towards the powers that be to participate in things like this is that doesn't diminish my love for the people that I see every day, those hardworking people, those dogged determination that I see out there from so many, and even those that don't have that dogged determination, some people feel disconnected. Dave, there's so many different stories that I'm thinking about in my head, and I really can't go on here, but there are some people that feel disconnected from society and partake in, many different ways of coping with that, or being disconnected from their communities. And it saddens the heart, but it motivates at least me, and I know it motivates people like Julian Assange and many others who have no notoriety. They work everyday jobs. They had doctors, lawyers. There's certain lawyers, not all lawyers. There's some school teachers. There's some nurses. There's a lot of different people, a lot of different occupations that love people, and they want to see people have a better life. And I think that that's what a lot of people want to see. All right. Take care. Many well wishes.